And so Baltic Sentry is NATO's response, where they've basically sent a kind of flotilla of, there's a Dutch frigate, there's a German minesweeper, there's British aircraft, there's Dutch fighter jets, all right to the kind of northeastern corner of the Baltic, right on the border with Russia, to patrol that area and basically interrogate those people who are passing through, to stop them breaking cables.
Britain's threatening robust action over Russian ships that are suspected of loitering over undersea infrastructure. The Times' defense correspondent George Grylls has been with the NATO mission scrambled to keep an eye on these crucial pipes and cables and joins me now. Hi, George.
Hello.
Talk me through Operation Baltic Sentry. Where are they and what are they doing?
So it's a response to a series of incidents that happened at the end of last year. So in the space of 2 months, 3 cables in the Baltic Sea were cut in basically suspicious circumstances. Now, these are the cables that, the gas pipelines that carry our energy. They're the internet cables that keep us connected to the world. So they're incredibly important. And NATO has basically had enough because they suspect Russia of sabotaging the cables deliberately using kind of oil tankers that are supposedly transferring goods to, for example, drag their anchor along the seabed and rupture these cables. And so Baltic Sentry is NATO's response, where they've basically sent a kind of flotilla of, there's a Dutch frigate, there's a German minesweeper, there's British aircraft, there's Dutch fighter jets, all right to the kind of northeastern corner of the Baltic, right on the border with Russia, to patrol that area and basically interrogate those people who are passing through, to stop them breaking cables.
So it's not just frigates, it's also divers and submersible drones. How tough are the conditions for these divers? I've been on the Baltic Sea and it's bloody cold.
Yeah, I was out there earlier this week and it was absolutely perishing. It's really tough in January. Also, as I was speaking to German divers who are kind of actually, they're trained mainly in mine clearance, so their job is mostly to defuse mines, but those skills are obviously transferable to trying to protect these underwater cables. And they were saying that if you could dive in the Baltic, you could dive anywhere. It's so cold. There's variable depths. The seabed is also of different types. They said visibility is sometimes just sort of 10 centimeters down at the bottom. It's a pretty inhospitable place.
So just how serious, you touched on the implications. What's the worst that could happen if this sort of infrastructure is hit? And across these kind of distances, is there much NATO can do to protect these pipes and cables?
So, to give you an idea of how vital they are for the modern world, about 95% of internet traffic is provided through underwater cables. Trillions of dollars of financial transactions are kind of underwritten by instant communications along these lines, and not to mention the energy that keeps the lights on and the heating on. So, it's hard to underplay how important these cables are. What can NATO do about it? Well, they can't really retaliate. It's a kind of they don't want to escalate with Russia, and basically attacking a oil tanker would amount to a declaration of war. But also the whole point is that these attacks are deniable. It's very hard to prove what has happened at the bottom, whether it's an accident, whether it's deliberate, and so what NATO is kind of doing is trying to illuminate what's happening on the floor. That's why you're having these divers. That's why you're having these drones that can go down and take video. That's why they've got kind of sonar scanning equipment which bounces frequencies down to the sea floor so that they can build a picture. Basically, so they can say to Russia, "We see you. We know what you're doing down there. You can't get away with denying culpability." And that's the approach, rather than a kind of full-on military response.
We see you, we know what you're doing were also the words used by the UK Defence Secretary on Wednesday. It was quite a direct warning to President Putin. He talked about the growing aggression by Russia. Is this issue rising up the agenda now?
Yeah, I think NATO countries have been aware of it for some time, but at the moment they still, it's a struggle to work out what to do because, for example, the Eagle S, which was this ship that severed the S-Link 2 cable and actually prompted the first big response, which was from Finland, which kind of boarded it. Well, Finland is now in kind of legal troubles over, from the owners of the ship. But the ownership of the ship is itself really complicated. It's flagged in I can't remember exactly. The Cook Islands. That's right. Yeah, it's flagged in the Cook Islands. It's owned in Dubai. It's kind of run from India, and the whole kind of opacity of ship ownership structure is designed to kind of hide the identity of who is behind it. So you're shooting at a really a target that you don't really know who you're going for. So that's why you can't really retaliate directly.
There has been denial from Russia of responsibility. Other people point to perhaps other reasons for ships dragging their anchors or loitering. But in Finland, in particular, they're getting pretty shaky about this.
Yeah, I mean, the Finns have basically said enough is enough. We don't buy your excuses. We don't think it's plausible that you were dragging an anchor for 60 miles along the seabed, which is why you saw the action that you did, which was on Boxing Day, actually, after the ship broke the cable on Christmas Day. And they basically impounded the ship. So that speaks to the kind of growing impatience of those countries around the Baltic. So the more left field suggestions include, why not just blockade the whole sea? Because now that Finland and Sweden are members of NATO, 9 out of 10 of the countries that border the Baltic Sea are part of NATO. So it's been nicknamed the NATO Lake, and it's a crucial waterway that Russia relies on to kind of trade with the rest of the world. So it is very much in NATO's gift. They could do that, but again, it would amount to a declaration of war, so they can't go that far. So instead, they just have to kind of intensely monitor the ships that are passing through to try and work out if they're up to kind of no good.
Are there more of these sort of incidents than we've seen before?
We certainly saw. I mean, the reason why we saw the action now is because there were 3 incidents in 2 months. There was another incident in 2023. A Chinese company said that, China admitted responsibility, but said it was an accident. That wasn't, that was met certainly with a few grumbles. Then there was obviously the Nord Stream 2 incident before then. So the Baltic really has been at the center of this kind of cable cutting frenzy that seems to be going on. And it was just that those 3 incidents in 2 months really, I think, pushed members over the edge.
How much can we read into that quite strong statement from John Healey, the UK Defence Secretary, on Wednesday? Is the UK line on this toughening up as well?
Well, the UK's got a defence review coming up, and I think this will be one area in which it wants to strengthen. Traditionally, the UK has kind of been a strong naval power, and in submarines in particularly, but part of it is just trying to see what's happening on the seabed. And so they've already invested in this vessel, RFA Proteus, which kind of uses, which has got all the technology that I saw in the Baltic, similar technology to kind of really illuminate what's happening right down there at the bottom of the sea. So I think you might see more tilt towards investing in this sort of stuff because they know it's a vulnerability, and it's for the Russians, it's a relatively cheap and deniable way of attacking the West.
So we've seen these warnings from the head of NATO, from Finland, from the UK now. Do the people on the NATO flotilla in the Baltic you were on see the problem as a continuing one?
Very much so. I mean, it's present. It's happened recently. I mean, it's worth bearing in mind as well. This shadow fleet that Russia uses to kind of get around sanctions, using kind of they get old oil tankers and then disguise their ownership through the means that we discussed before. It's not just that they could kind of have spying equipment, for example, to kind of record what are the positions of NATO ships and all the rest of it. It's not just that they could drag their anchors and rupture cables. It's also the environmental question, which is that a very old rusting tanker, perhaps not properly insured, could at any point just make a huge spillage in, next to the coast of a NATO member, and it's basically left to them to deal up, to clean up, and at a cost of one can't imagine, but at least hundreds of millions. So it's a real problem for the West.
George, thank you. I'm really grateful for your time today.
No worries at all.